Hello, and welcome to the Off-Meta Umineko Read-Along Podcast, the weekly podcast where I guide my friends and first-time readers through my favorite story of all time, the highly acclaimed murder mystery visual novel, Umineko When They Cry. We're discussing its narrative and themes, and they work together with our community to try and solve its various mysteries. We hope you'll join us on this exciting journey as we delve into the Witch's Cat Box. I'm Kyle J, and joining me on our one-way trip to Rokkenjiima, we have our readers, James Capelli, Bardic, and Becca. Hayley is once again on vacation, but welcome, y'all. How was your read this week?
Quick question for you, Kyle.
Mm-hmm.
Which of us are your friends and which of us are your first-time readers?
I think all of you are first-time readers, but I won't tell you which of you are friends.
All right.
I'll leave y'all to deduce that. It's part of the mystery.
Gotcha. Yes. I think only the community can figure that part out.
Yeah.
This is an interesting read. I had a lot of fun with it. I kind of like how the game is, getting straight to the meat, right? You don't have a ton of recap of the relationships and everything, which is obviously chapter 1 was a big part of. Here we are, 6 hours of reading in, and we get to the deaths of the 6, which are more or less the 6 I expected based on how the last one ended.
Yeah.
Just where they were,
Mm-hmm.
So why go out of her way? Well, I'll get into it when we start reading. It's good. Obviously, presents a lot of questions, a lot of intrigue as far as the story. I'm excited to dig into this one and see where it goes.
I have a lot of internal thoughts on character motives and whatnot, but I would say this read as a whole had the biggest U-curve in terms of how much I liked it. I loved the beginning, and the end was spectacular, and the middle I have a lot of thoughts about. So it just, but the beginning and the end make up for the middle in so many ways. So I'm excited to see how it goes.
Oh, then I'm not the opposite, but how I feel very opposite to you about the middle, at least apparently, because I was living for that stuff.
Oh, let's dive into it then.
All right. This week, we are continuing episode 2, Turn of the Golden Witch, with about 2.5 hours of the VN, ending when we got to the line, "You can't win against me after all, Ushiromiya Battleeeeeeeeeeer," after which the clock advances from 7:15 to 7:30. That is videos 25 through 27 if you're on the YouTube playlist. If you've not caught up to this point yet, go ahead and stop the podcast and catch up before rejoining us. Or if you're just listening to us along the ride, welcome aboard. Our story resumes in Kinzo's study, where he has awoken to find that he has survived the first twilight. He resists the urge to open his door and check that his defensive measures warded off some sort of attack. He remains steadfast in his desire to maintain a perfect defense, saying, "I will not shame myself like last time." In the rest of the mansion, the servants perform their morning duties as usual. Goda is happy because he gets to forego the other chores he normally is assigned to focus exclusively on preparing meals for the family conference. Shannon, seeking to greet the adults who had apparently been up all night discussing Beatrice and the inheritance, enters the dining room and finds it empty. She does, however, find a note on the dining room table with a single word: chapel.
Shame myself like last time. That means that he either he is referring to the beginning, when he first met Beatrice, I guess, where he could have shamed himself, or he's thinking of episode 1. Which means he remembers something from episode 1, and he died last time. But I don't really understand because he wasn't part of the 6 that were first sacrificed, which means that he woke up on day 2 without dying. So what exactly caused him, I will not shame myself like last time. So what happened in the gap of episode 1 between when he woke up and when we found him in that incinerator that got himself shamed, if this is what he was referring to? And I just think that that's such an interesting line drop.
Oh, for sure.
That I think actually you can build a ton of worlds out of that line.
I have the exact same note here as Ben that says, "I will not shame myself like last time," as in last iteration or last time 30 years ago. So...
Hey, same wavelength.
The fun part about being the last person to do the reading is I could just put my thoughts into our group discussion and not worry about spoiling it for anybody else, knowing you guys have already finished. I saw that and immediately was just like, what the fuck? I immediately went to the same place, like, oh shit, he remembers. But there's a big issue with him remembering. You know what it is?
What?
That means this is a fantasy story, not a mystery story. And if he's referring to chapter 1, then he has some sort of mystical memory of what happened the first go around. So I think the story's going to be somewhere. It's going to be like, oh, you decide. What do you think? And then man, I don't really like that either. I don't know. I think for the sake of the argument of is it mystery or is it fantasy, it's not going to be explained, and if it is, not for a long time.
Okay.
Because that line is clearly there to make you think, yes, it is a fantasy. He has memories, but Beatrice has already said he's not a very prolific spellcaster. If he remembers, then he is competent enough, which means this is already some pretty low-level magic, if that is what it is, blah, 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 which we get into a little bit later. How strong is Beatrice right now anyway? So my theory is that he's referring to the last time that he saw her.
Interesting. I think, based on what you just said, and I was kind of processing it, I think that actually it's both a mystery and a fantasy. I am almost on Team Sci-Fi at this point. I think that there's a weird...
Ben. Hell yeah, Ben.
I think that there's a weird time loop happening. And I think time loops can fall under Sci-Fi. Star Trek does it a ton.
Groundhog Day is a sci-fi story, not fantasy.
I'm not going there.
That's just how I define the genres. All right?
Sure. So if it's a time loop where somehow people are forgetting things, but Kinzo, for whatever reason, is able to retain memories, then there are elements of both mystery and fantasy included in this entire reading that just kind of can coalesce under the world of sci-fi, but the science part of it is something that we are not, as a reader, aware of yet. And I think that might actually get explained in the end of the questions arc.
Yeah.
At the end of episode 4, I think that's going to be the big reveal of what happened that allows this time loop to happen, why things keep changing. But, and we're skipping forward a little bit, but the red text is the mystery part of it, is that it still has to all fall under these rules that we don't know yet. We don't know the rules of this 7-dimensional chess game.
Yeah.
So, therefore, it makes me think that because there is a framework to this that we're just now getting by the end of this reading, it's actually, weirdly enough, a science fiction that has mystery elements and fantasy elements coalesced together in a way that us as the reader, we have no idea of fully understanding it, because the author very clearly has directed us away from a lot of things, other than dropping hints like this.
Right. Yeah, I very much agree with a lot of what you said. The other thing I just had a thought of while you were talking is this game isn't of Beatrice's design.
I don't think so.
Right? This is Kinzo's roulette that's going on.
Yeah.
He's the one that takes the ring and throws it off, and we get the crash of thunder and the lightning strike that kind of signifies it has begun. If that could also have something to do with how he would be remembering things from time to time again. If is a spell or whatever that he has done, all his studying has led to this. It could also be when they met, when they first, kind of made the deal, when she would collect the interest, when she gave the epitaph and find my goal, it's all moot, etc. That rules were put into place back then.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think back to when Shannon is talking to her on the beach and Beatrice is trying to be friendly with her and kind of ingratiate herself, and it seems like she has an honest moment about her and Kinzo's prior relationship where she admits that, like, he kind of got one over on her and now she's kind of stuck in the situation. So it feels like a game that they are locked in together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I could see that.
Yeah, it's a common trope in time loop kind of stories where people can get trapped in them for a long time.
Yeah, I think we're going to see way more than, like, the start of their relationship. I think we're going to get to a point of explaining what these witches are.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I forget the name of the one that spoke to Battler after the tea party.
Burnt Castle.
Or that Beatrice... Burnt Castle. And I'm sure there's others.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to get explanation of what they are, the limitations that they have in this realm. Why does the island need to be blocked off within the typhoon? You know, because they're all pretty understanding, like, no, we're cut off, nothing's going to change. You know, when Kinzo's talking to the servants, he's just like, of course, this is how it is. So, he knows a lot more, obviously, but is it because of his studies? Is it because of the plans, the rules that they settled on? We're going to find out one day.
Well, we shall see.
My last note for this section is I have a note about Kinzo saying that he, like, doesn't give in to human whims.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of lets himself think that he's transcending being human because of it. And
participate to No Nut November, and now he thinks he's, like, enlightened.
Exactly. You stole my joke. But yes. He's superhuman because he never jacks off.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. One thing I do want to kind of go back to, y'all mentioned we talked about, like, what happened to Kinzo in the first game. We talked a bit about it previously, how, yeah, there was definitely a long period of time that's really, we have no idea what was going on with Kinzo. We last saw him in the morning before, like, the bodies were discovered, and then just gone. Whether something happened shortly after then, or if he hid and then something happened later, we don't know for certain. But if we take the reading that this is saying that he does have a memory of last time, and he kind of talks before this about how, I'm not going to go check to make sure my defenses worked. It's kind of implying that maybe that's what happened last time. Like, he survived the first 6, and he was like, I'm going to go make sure, like, did something try and break in? Goes out there to check, and then gets nabbed. So
I think that's very much what it's implying. Either that or Beatrice or something else was communicating with him on the other side of the door, and he was so besotted with wanting to see her that he went out.
Mm-hmm.
I think it could be either one or both of those things. He opens the door, she's there. Who's to say? Because she says that she can kill outside of the order. Like 5 people aren't guaranteed to make it into the gold.
Yeah, as we saw with Natsuhi in the last game, she died outside required 13.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but he was still counted, especially in the credits, as dying as part of the 13.
Yes, he died as part of it, for sure.
So I'm wondering, like, did he die out of order? Did he die out of order, and then they made it they framed it like he died in order? Or was he actually alive up until after
Evan Hideyoshi?
I think it was after Kanon.
Yeah, he'd have to be after Kanon.
I would say it's going to be very much arbitrary and hidden as such, because he was probably burned to death. Him being in the furnace is probably what killed him, not whatever allowed his body to be placed there. If he was knocked unconscious, drugged, whatever.
Sure.
That's what I think.
You could make the case that he was kidnapped and then he was put into the furnace at that time. So.
Mm-hmm.
But we were in that room.
But they were smelling. No, because they smelled that was the whole smell, was the burning flesh.
Yeah.
True, that happens before Kanon for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm trying to figure out, is, like, what's the timeline of they put him in the credits as being after Kanon had died. That is when Kinzo was stabbed somewhere on the 4th Twilight. I would need to pull up my notes.
Yeah.
It was, and then Kanon got stabbed in the head, I believe.
No, Kinzo was stabbed in the head. Kanon was stabbed in the chest.
Was it chest and then head? Is that the progression of the order for the
Oh,
third,
interesting.
Third,
it's head chest. So Kinzo was first Because the smell of Kinzo burning is why Kanon goes into the furnace room in the first place, and that's where he dies. So Kinzo is dead before him.
Although you could make the case that he was stabbed post-mortem afterwards. There's a time window where theoretically Kanon dies, then the killer stabs
I'm wrong.
Kinzo's corpse.
I'm wrong. No, Kinzo is the 4th Twilight.
Okay.
Kanon is the 5th Twilight.
Okay. So the timeline, it still requires him to die after Eva Hideyoshi.
Yep.
But yeah.
Wait, who's the 3rd Twilight again?
There is no 3rd Twilight. That's...
Oh, the 3rd Twilight, nobody dies.
Yeah, the something you'll all say her name or
Praise
something.
my noble name.
Yeah. But the 2 that are close are the 2nd, then they all say their name, and then Kinzo dies.
Okay.
So I think that does line up then, and we were just mistaken with the...
Okay.
Yeah, and there's some wiggle room in there, but yeah, it does kind of imply that Kinzo was probably kidnapped for a period of time.
Until after Eva and Hideyoshi had died.
I'm pretty sure I know who killed Kanon in Chapter 1 now.
Ooh, all right. I mean, that is the way this story works, is you're supposed to use information you gained from later chapters to recontextualize previous chapters, so maybe we'll get back to that later.
Yeah. I'll definitely bring it up later in this.
All right. Genji wakes Rosa and informs her of the strange situation. He leads her out to the chapel, and even as an adult, she feels guilty approaching this place Kinzo held sacred. Gathered in front of the chapel are Shannon, Kanon, and Goda, and painted on its door is an eerie magic circle we might recognize from the garden shed in the first game. Rosa questions the servants and is informed that Shannon discovered the graffiti after following the note from the dining room. Kanon redirects Rosa's attention to the magic circle, and she notices that written in English underneath it is the phrase, "Happy Halloween for Maria." Freaked out by her daughter being brought into whatever this strange situation is, Rosa starts to rush off to check on her when she realizes that none of the other adults are here. Goda and Shannon confirm that all 6 of them are missing. Rosa asks if they've checked inside the chapel yet, but apparently the chapel is locked and its only key is missing. Rosa confirms that the door is locked, and Kanon asks if they should break a window and enter. Rosa says she can't okay that, and then remembers the letter that Beatrice gave Maria yesterday. She returns to the guest house, sneaks into the cousin's room, and searches Maria's handbag. Inside, she finds a sealed envelope. Within it, the key to the chapel. Returning to the others, Rosa quickly unlocks the door to the chapel and enters. Inside, peering through the dark, she sees a table covered in Halloween decorations has been set up on the altar. There she can see Kraus, Netsuhi, Eva, Hideyoshi, Rudolph, and Kyrie, all seated at the table with their backs to her. However, as she approaches, she finally comes to realize they are not simply dolls or sleeping, but in fact 6 corpses, their stomachs cut open, stuffed with candy. After a good amount of disgusting sounds and screams, Rosa orders Genji and Shannon to inform Kinzo and ask what to do, and Goda and Kanon to call the police and then have Dr. Nanjo come.
So, other than the regular gruesomeness, which we're going to get to a little bit later, the thing that I wanted to mention here was this is very clearly the narrator is Rosa in this moment. What she's seeing, why she's seeing it, and she definitely reverts into having some very childlike speech patterns. Icky, ooey, gooey, like repeating these very simple one-syllable words over and over in the descriptors, which to me sends her back into a traumatized state, possibly something that she went through in childhood, which makes me wonder what could have caused that. I mean, obviously, Kinzo was a very abusive father, very abusive man physically and emotionally, but I can't remember exactly what it was said in this moment that made me think that Rosa was beseeched by Beatrice as a young girl herself. That the Beatrice reaching out to Shannon and Maria was not her first time going through it. This wasn't her for the first time having the strength to come back in. I believe that this could be something repressed and is why Rosa hates this side of Maria so much. I think there's going to be a lot to unpack in her childhood there, and I think we're going to see it in this chapter. Right, last chapter it was very much Natsui was the parent that survived. That we're going to get to see her perspective. This time it's obviously Rosa because the rest are dead, and Kinzo's not going to give a shit. Which means I think it makes you wonder what parents are going to be around in the future chapters, right? Because Eva and Hideyoshi didn't do much last time. I guess you could argue they died a little early for that. So I'm looking forward to, hopefully we'll get a Kyrie focused one where she will kind of do some more coaching on flipping the chessboard and how to think about different perspectives and things like that.
To actually become the best character that we know that she is, and like that, like take her rightful place as the best character.
We don't have the time to really get into Kyrie right now, but I think the fact that she gave up quickly, she lasted the longest, but she gave up quickly in admitting that devils were proved. I believe that shows me that her character does have a ceiling that
I agree.
will already has kind of gone beyond.
I think he's gone beyond because of pure stubbornness. I don't like that.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I love the guy. Battler's fucking awesome.
I have 2 questions for right here. First, this is where I'm thinking, did they ever actually open Rosa's letter that Beatrice gave her?
No, they still have not opened it.
I was wondering if it was implied to be the one that said chapel, the one that was on the dining table, but I feel like that would have been specified if it were true.
No,
because that was just a written note.
It was just written paper. Every time the envelopes are mentioned, it's very much, this is the Ushiromya Signia envelope. This is the wax seal. Yeah,
exactly. Cool.
There's a case to be made that it's the one we're about to find. We're about to find an envelope in the chapel,
right?
That says like, here are the contract and stuff, like salt the epitaph and all that,
right?
So. And that's very similar to the kind of thing you would have expected her letter to say if she was supposed to read it at dinner. So it's possible that it was read in the chapel later that evening.
Right.
So we also have to remember about the note that someone wrote the note chapel and left it in the dining room. Then, at the end of the previous session, the session before we're recording this, the last thing we see is the 7 of them plus Beatrice in the chapel. So obviously they got, we don't know how, but they went from the dining room to the chapel, and then we go to them saying that devils were proved. There is something, again, we're missing a chunk of time in day 1 where we don't know what happened to the 7 of them and why Rosa specifically left, but the other 6 are dead. So,
well, they could have all gone to bed, right? That's what happened last time. Is they went to bed. Oh God, no, were they? Because last time they were all killed in the dining room, and then their bodies were moved.
Well, no, Rosa wasn't in that group at the end of last episode.
Yes, she was.
She? Oh, she was? Okay.
That's the thing that keeps getting me, is that nowhere throughout this entire reading does she mention being in the chapel before.
It is odd, for sure.
It never gets mentioned. She never says anything about how they ended up there because, like, they were already there. She is hiding something.
I don't think she's hiding something.
I disagree. I have a high suspicion of her as a culprit, actually, in this.
Ooh. Do you think this could get into the possession?
Yeah, maybe. I think that there's definitely some argument to be made about that. I don't know the exact motives or whatnot, but I do find it extremely strange that she's not bringing up the fact the 7 of them plus Beatrice were in the chapel last night, and then there wasn't the big paint blood sigil out front. They said devils were proved, and then look, you can't find Beatrice. Well, some people found Beatrice. The main characters can't find Beatrice. 6 of them out of the 7 who were in the chapel are now dead, and who's just left who hasn't said a single word about the chapel from the night before is Rosa. I don't think that's insignificant.
I do have another theory that kind of plays into what you're saying that I just thought of.
Okay.
Which is, Battler later says that he recalled Rosa coming into the room and getting the key. But we also know that it has now been proven by the end of the reading possible that someone may have gotten their hands on the key in between the chapel scene and that. What if the moment we see Rosa go in and get the key is not the time that Battler saw her?
Yeah, maybe. I have another theory, but I'll save it for later because I think that it fits better at the end of the episode.
Write it down before you forget.
I have it burned into my memory right now.
All right.
You had a second question, Becca.
Yeah. My second question is, how important do we think the sacrifice is, like, accepting Beatrice's power before she kills them is important? Because we see all of them admitting, oh my god, yeah, devils are real.
She does say to Kyrie that she must accept it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And then also, I know we're not there yet, but in the next chapter with Kanon and Jessica, she also kind of, like, makes Kanon submit in a way.
Maybe. I go back and I think about in chapter 1 that Natsui was supposed to be one of the 6, but the scorpion charm protected her. She didn't admit to anything. They were all just kind of afraid. The only person who believed and accepted it of those 6 was Shannon, albeit her belief was pretty strong, but we're also of the opinion that she replaced Natsui. Maybe that wasn't the case.
We also don't know if Beatrice appeared to them in the dining room and convinced them before killing them in that timeline as well.
That's fair.
There's another block of time in the midnight of day 1 into day 2 that we still don't know what happened. And I think that's going to be another thing.
Where once again, some group of the parents slip away for some reason, and then everyone else dies. So that seems to be consistent between the two.
Yeah, Ava and Hideyoshi were the ones that got away that time. In episode 1, we have Rosa in episode 2. So what...
And Natsui in episode 1. 3 of the parents.
True.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's true, because Natsui had a headache. You're right. So there were 3 of them.
I'm starting to get suspicious of Goda again.
That's not my theory.
And it's not just because his name sounds like goat?
No. Just because if he's the one that had to replace... I got a whole theory now where he's one of Beatrice's furniture.
Interesting.
Oh, interesting on the other side.
But I'll save that for the end of the episode to really dig in.
All right.
But going back to the whole, like, these blocks of time are missing, I'm wondering if the Answers arc is going to be revisiting these moments.
I think I said that, like, episodes ago, and I am more thinking that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we shall see. Meanwhile, the cousins have arrived in the mansion. Maria is crying, unable to find her mother or the letter that Beatrice had given her to hold on to. Battler has a faint memory of Rosa coming into the cousins' room, taking something out of Maria's handbag. Eventually, they stumble upon Dr. Nanjo, who likewise has no idea what's going on. Then, Kanon and Goda come running up to them. Goda enters the servants' room and fruitlessly attempts to get the phone to work. Kanon informs Dr. Nanjo of the situation and leads him away to the chapel. Foolishly, the cousins follow and stumble upon the grisly murders of their parents.
So, my question to you all is, the first episode had relatively, like, well, not a tame scene within the little shed, was more comprehensive. Like, you could comprehend what happened a little bit better than this, with all the candy, the chest and guts cut open.
The evisceration. This was evisceration.
Yeah, it's more gruesome.
Well, yeah.
The question that I have is, do we think, in the world that this is a team mystery, do we think that anyone of the 18, not including Beatrice, could have done this? Has the heart to do this?
I mean, if Hannibal Lecter could do it, and I feel like it's pretty on par.
The late, great Hannibal Lecter.
But it is very NBC Hannibal, but the other thing is that's the point. She's showing off on purpose to be as, like, fantastical and out there as possible.
Sure.
As we know the characters at this time, no.
Okay.
We would need more information. And it may even be the first piece of information is, yes, they did this, and then we show you more of their character to show that they were always capable of it, etc. I go back to the first Danganronpa with, what was her name?
Which one? There were a lot of crazy ladies in
the school. The little girl who goes like it turns out she's a serial killer.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And she's got split personality.
I don't remember her name, but the scissors girl.
Yes.
Oh, I thought that was Danganronpa 2.
No, that's one.
Anyway, that not important.
But yeah, so like what you saw of her, what was presented is no, of course not. Maybe there's a couple of hints that she's like a little weird, but then she goes full blown insane. It's like, oh, okay.
Sure.
Then they give the background for why it's plausible within the world they built. It could be something like that.
Fair enough. I was just curious on your thoughts on that because my thoughts are I could see with the right motivation Rosa having done this actually.
Oh yeah.
And that I do think that there is a world in where she maybe not split personality, but is, or maybe split personality. I'm really not sure, but like there's some world of we're missing a piece to understand how she went from.
I hope not split personality, simply because we've seen it been done. It can be okay, but it's never a super engaging concept.
No.
But if she is the person who did it, or at least had a hand in it, I think it's very interesting to show the reveal from her point of view.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that, and that actually made me, like, when you said that earlier, it made me, like, actually rethink that theory a little bit, which is the whole reason I had the note in here in the first place.
Right.
So, but I still wanted to kind of discuss, like, do we think that this is actually the witch showing off, or could this, in Battler's mind, have a human had to have done this? So.
Well, right now he's not so worried about that, but we'll get into that in a few months.
He's living in that really convenient nebulous space where he's saying it is physically possible to a human to have done it, and that is my only burden of proof. I don't have to actually accuse anyone I love of having done it.
He's being a lawyer. He's being a supernatural lawyer.
Not yet, but now we know that that's going to be Beatrice's next goal. I mean, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but that's going to be her next goal, is trying to pin it on a specific person. He's going to have to get out of accusing a specific person next time.
I'm excited.
Time then seems to stop, and Meta Battler and Meta Beatrice appear. Battler's disgusted by another cruel, elaborate killing, and Beatrice says that he should instead be grateful. After all, this time she left all of their faces untouched so that he might confirm their deaths himself. She tells him, "Don't give in to emotion and stop thinking. My game has already begun, you know." Returning to the game board, Battler, George, and Jessica all cry for their dead parents. Goda returns and informs Rosa the phones are down. Jessica, wanting revenge on Beatrice, the obvious culprit, runs off towards the mansion with Goda and Kanon chasing after her.
I have one brief note here, but
sure.
I love this moment where she goes just completely unhinged and is like, you should be grateful. I left their faces intact for you this time. Like, that's the first time we ever see that much of an exaggerated crazy face from her, and I love it.
I almost screenshot it and put it into the chat as like some sort of like a reaction emoji or sort of thing. But I was like, oh, this has gone wild, where she's clearly like in ecstasy of like horrific bliss of the moment. Because I didn't even think of that. I totally forgotten like that was one of Battler's arguments the first time around, and she's now saying like, you know, and they even kind of mention when Rosa finds them that they look like dolls, but no, they're not. So just kind of proving like that's not what's going on this time. Yeah, that little moment was so great.
Battler wonders if the island somehow slipped into a world where common sense doesn't apply while he was taking a nap yesterday afternoon. On a tray on the table where their parents' corpses are set, George finds another of the witch's envelopes. Reading it, it says that Beatrice would be collecting her gold and its interest from the Ushiromiya family, unless, of course, someone solves the epitaph. Additionally, on the table they find not one, but 3 gold ingots inscribed with the crest of the one-winged eagle.
This really did away with my theory that there is only one gold bar.
Yeah.
I saw it, I was like, all right, I'll take that out.
It was a good theory. It really was. Jessica slams her fists against the VIP room door, screeching at Beatrice. Kanon gives Jessica his master key so that she can enter and attempt to confront the witch. However, they find the room to be empty. Kanon finds a message from the witch, which belittles Jessica and her parents. Jessica then begins destroying the room with a lamp until Gota manages to wrestle it away from her. With no way to vent her anger, she collapses in grief and begins to have an asthma attack. Kanon asks Gota to leave taking care of Jessica to him, carries her on his shoulder to her room. Jessica often forgets to carry her inhaler with her, so Kanon would often carry it for her. However, he had failed to do so today, and has to bring her to Jessica's room in order to relieve her breathing. Kanon says that he will wait outside in the hallway in case Jessica needs anything. Jessica stops him for a moment, but then lets him leave. In the hall, Kanon ponders his nature as furniture when suddenly Beatrice appears. She says that there are 3 ways to hurt a woman. One is to hurt them with a knife, another is to hurt them in their heart, and finally, the most effective way is to betray their hopes, as no living being is more of a dreamer than a woman. Kanon asks why Beatrice has appeared just to sneer at him, but unfortunately, Beatrice has other motives. Jessica and Kanon make perfect candidates for the second Twilight, the 2 who are close. Kanon tries to say that there's nothing between him and Jessica until they don't qualify for that Twilight, but Beatrice says that it doesn't matter. She'll simply kill Jessica for the fun of it, so there are no rules preventing her from killing beyond what is needed for the ritual. Beatrice suddenly vanishes from the hallway, and Kanon hears Jessica scream. Rushing to Jessica's aid, Kanon finds her room filled with golden butterflies, the minion of the witch. Kanon fends off the butterflies, then Beatrice appears and summons furniture of her own, a large, muscular butler with the head of a goat. Jessica has no idea what is going on, and Kanon tells her to stand back. The goat attendant manifests a purple blade of energy in the back of its hand. In response, Kanon manifests a red one of his own. I hope you like that sound effect because you're going to hear it like a billion times during this fight scene. The 2 face off in a duel, eventually resulting in Kanon's victory. The goat attendant dissolving back into golden butterflies. Kanon then turns to attack Beatrice, but on cutting through her, she simply dissolves herself into gold and appears elsewhere in the room unharmed. Beatrice continues to belittle Kanon as furniture. Jessica rebuts her, saying that Kanon is human. Beatrice decides it's time to end this and summons one of the 7 stakes of purgatory, Asmodeus the Lustful. This piece of furniture clearly outclasses Kanon, zipping around the room faster than the eye can see. When it suddenly strikes flesh, however, it is Jessica's back that is pierced, as she had thrown herself behind Kanon, suspecting the witch's minion would cowardly strike there. As Jessica falls to the floor dying, Beatrice summons another stake, Satan the Wrathful, who quickly strikes Kanon down as well. With her last breath, Jessica asks Kanon what his real name is, but passes away before he can respond. Kanon dies shortly after, and Beatrice uses her magic to make his corpse vanish from the room.
And just like that, I'm getting an idea of how they turned this into a fighting game.
So, let me talk about this part, and how much I disliked this entire scene.
Ooh, the entire scene.
I found the fight scene to be incredibly boring.
Fair.
This is going to be a little bit negative, and I'm sorry about it, but I don't know, it didn't do anything for me personally. I don't feel like it enhanced anything. There were some very small plot points, like the girls being like the daggers themselves, like Asmodeus and Satan, like very neat. Love seeing that. But I just felt like it just went on for too long, was dragged out, and it kind of, it took away a lot of the mystery of what could be happening.
Well, that's kind of part of a mystery story.
Like,
you get answers.
No, but I don't feel like it gave... I feel like it asked more questions than it gave answers, in the sense of, where did these blades come from? What is this goat guy? Like, it to me felt very out of left field and broke up the flow of a really good story to get to the end result of the 2 dying. Like, there's obviously more going on here, but I don't know. It really threw me for a loop.
I think that's fair. It is the introduction of 2 additional magical elements that don't especially affect the outcome of the situation.
Yeah, it just felt weird and like out of place within what has been happening so far. Unlike the thing that happens next, which I feel fits in perfectly and has been, like, actually enhances the experience. I felt like the whole fighting scene detracted from it. That's just my opinion, but I'm also not a huge fighting scene person. I'm like, it doesn't interest me as much, so I get it.
So is it the fact that they fought is what puts you off?
The blades, like summoning blades, was such a weird choice. Like, it's not that they just summoned them and like they had to fight them hand to hand. Suddenly they had blades. Suddenly Kanon had a red thing coming out of his arm.
Well, that's just what furniture are. They were created for this thing.
No, it's not though.
That is absolutely the sensation that I got. Is like furniture, whether they are created or trained or manifested or gifted or bestowed upon, this is what they are able to do. They are a pawn of a spellcaster or a witch. We've seen now 3 of Beatrices, and we've seen several of Kinzos, and this is the first time any one of them have done their duty in what they're created to do.
This is where I don't know if I've actually brought this up on a recording yet so far, but it's something I've brought up in our chat, is I am very curious about the relationship to calling yourself a piece of furniture and calling yourself a witch. Like, because of things that we've already read, it seems like human, witch, and furniture are like a rock, paper, scissors situation where they each have advantages and disadvantages against the others. So this is something furniture can do, I think is a really interesting thing. And also, they call it a locus, which in the annotations at the end of the chapter, when you pronounce the word for locus in Japanese, it sounds like the word for miracle as well. Which, if magic is made of miracles, it's supposedly a magical thing that furniture can do. So, and here's the other thing, is I think I'm really interested in like the character of it all. So I really liked this whole chapter and scene as like Beatrice really going ham, going like full Judge Doom, like eyes bugging out of her sockets with like glee and sick pleasure. But I have a lot of notes about Kanon here because he
is a badass.
He's a badass. He's able to play games on her level like Battler, and isn't afraid to challenge her. There's something he says towards the beginning before Beatrice shows up to Jessica, I think, where he says, or maybe it's just like the narration, but he says scorn must be communicated, and he knew that she would show up because she has to like laugh at them, essentially.
She has to revel in it.
So he while she thinks humans are super predictable to an extent, he also can predict some of her goals. And I think he kind of thinks himself into a corner sometimes because he predicts so well that he gets so bogged down and he can't find a solution to get out of it because he's like, she's thought of everything.
Yeah.
Whereas Battler's always looking for the exit strategy.
What I really liked about him here is he understands his own limitations, understands the odds of him surviving are very small, but he's still going to put everything he can into it. Surpasses her expectations to the point where she was going to let him live until he splashed at her reflection. That pissed her off. She was rude, disgraceful, whatever. That's why she decided that they were going to die. So that's why I think this scene did a lot for Kanon as a character for me. I don't really love what it did for Jessica. I thought the whole sacrificing yourself, whatever, it's very, very cliche, and it's the sacrifice, blah blah blah. I don't know. We've seen it before.
Yeah. And to be fair, she was suddenly presented with all this magical stuff, and this is like the only thing she could do. It was just like, I'm so outclassed. Literally, all I can do is use my body as a shield.
But even she made the prediction of what Lust was going to do. You know, so I think there's going to be something to say, not even just about furniture, but to all those who wear the one-winged crest and how they're going to be able to fight back. And that might have even been a theory I had early on. Not they're going to manifest blades and physically fight with demons or whatever, but I could see like that's, you know, that there was something special about those who were beyond just being in the family. But one thing, there are a couple things I say I didn't like about the scene to agree with you, is the whole the goat head thing shows up, and I was like, oh shit, this thing looks terrifying. I loved it. It's silent, it broods, it doesn't say anything, it just attacks. And then he beats it, like, oh shit, and that's one of her pawns. And then what's stronger than that? Anime waifu, schoolgirl outfit. Oh,
Yep.
what does she do? Oh, she's so fast. Like, that's art. The art doesn't really do anything to translate that. Whereas the goat-headed demon did. I like that a lot more. And the fact that the two stakes that we see are both basically the exact same art, I'm just like, I hope we get to see a little bit more variety here. But yeah,
Pelly wants variety in his anime waifus.
Yeah, apparently. Becca, you can go first.
Well, also something to note here is that the stake that kills Kanon this time is the same stake that killed him in the first time.
I was about to say that.
Nice.
Yep.
And it was pre-planned by Beatrice because she sends Lust first, and she wanted Jessica to jump in front of it, and her prediction was right. So, and then she still gets Kanon with Wrath again.
The stake of Satan kills him both times.
The first time we saw the stakes in the bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, like the physical stake.
Lust eats Kanon. So what's going to be? Is it just going to be lying there on the ground? Like, first of all, the whole eating him thing, like, that was super cruel and harsh. And the game even notes that she wouldn't even let their bodies be together because she's that evil. I thought, again, that was great. Beatrice just continues to be a bloodthirsty, fantastic character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fun to get to see her be more active and get to monologue and stuff.
I do like that the game also doesn't tell you that stakes are going to be impaled in them.
Yeah.
Right. They just Lust stops being there all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Stabbed in the stomach. That's it.
And then the physical manifestation of it is the stake.
Right.
Right.
So I want to be very clear. I didn't love the fight scene itself. That was the thing that I took the most issue with. The things that the fight scene did, I think, were very valuable.
Okay.
And I still think that the things that came out of it were important. Like the fact that if there were I'm thinking about the locked room with with Hideyoshi and Eva in episode 1, where they were stabbed in the forehead, both of them, one in the shower and one on the bed or something. If these are actually little anime waifus that stabbed them, they got in there due to magic. It just kind of turns this entire thing that's about to happen of this could be a mystery story, could be a fantasy, and this whole thing just felt like fantasy.
Yeah.
And it just kind of threw a lot of things out the window that kind of unveiled something but didn't answer any questions.
But I mean, we've seen Beatrice turn into golden butterflies before. We've seen her...
Sure, but it's not to the... I think that's a little bit different of having, some sort of, power versus someone in this scenario being able to pull a sword out of their, from their arm. I don't know. It's just... it's on two different levels for me.
Yeah, I mean, we don't get to see Battler respond too much of this at the time.
Does he even see any of it?
No, and that's... I don't know.
I will say that we will come back to this death later on.
In a future reading.
In a future episode.
They need to eventually find Jessica's body. They're not going to find
when they
Kanon's
find the body, they'll talk about it.
But they're going to find Jessica's body, and they might find Kanon's body somewhere else. We don't know. But we know that it's going to happen because they need to discover it that there is still a killer among them. And my guess, just wild theory, I think they're going to blame Genji. Because Genji was the one that was kind of around them at the time.
You mean Gota?
Gota, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Gota. I think they're going to blame Gota.
So, a theory that I just started cooking up in my brain, so it's very half-baked, don't come for me, but based on what you were just saying, Ben, about how it leans so heavily on the fantasy element in this chapter that it takes some of the mystery out of it for you. I'm wondering if maybe the point is not whether or not magic actually exists, because maybe in this cut-off time loop from the rest of the world, impossible things are possible.
Mm-hmm.
But especially based on what we're going to get to in the next episode, and I think we should continue with the synopsis very shortly, but I don't think it's necessarily about whether or not magic is actually real. It's about whether Battler can convincingly disprove it as the only option continuously, thus proving that it's possible it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
All right, well, before we move on, I just want to say one thing. I think your concerns are legitimate, Ben, and I want you to kind of keep that in mind because the story definitely wants you to feel that way to some degree, and I think you will have, like, part of the story will address your concerns as we continue.
And I'm excited for that, but just, and all of my concerns are based on the assumption of we've gone through an episode and I guess a half right now, and this is the only thing that has felt completely out of place to me.
Yeah, they've gone through quite a bit of lengths to make it ambiguous if magical things are actually happening, and then we have this. So it is odd for sure. So you're not wrong to keep that in mind.
That's kind of where I came from, and maybe I came off a little strong, but it was the part that threw me for a loop. But then what we're about to get to, it brought me right back in.
Yes.
So.
Oh, also, one other note. I think the visual update that we're using does this combat a bit of a disservice because by making the visuals better, we kind of have an expectation that the combat will look better, and it really doesn't. Like, when you're watching it with the old sprites and the old animations, it kind of gives you the onus to imagine more. And so I think by giving the enhanced graphics, we're kind of less encouraged to imagine what's happening ourselves. And so it makes the combat seem very, very stiff. And it's like, okay, we get some slashy like things, and that's it. That's kind of odd. You would have expected more with the level of graphics that they're showing. Meanwhile, in Kinzo's study, Shannon and Genji are reporting the result of the first twilight to Kinzo. Kinzo cares not about the deaths of his children, only that his ceremony is proceeding according to plan. Shannon asks Kinzo what orders she should relay to Rosa, and Kinzo says that they can do whatever they please. He then drops a sick Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy reference. He tells Shannon and Genji that they can do whatever they wish to. Genji redoubles that, as furniture, their place is by Kinzo's side. Kinzo then tells Shannon that he will write a will and that she will copy it down for him. He thinks back over the past and decides to start with when he met Beatrice, sometime in the Showa era, towards the end of the war.
Not being prolific in Japanese history, I would love to know what year that was.
Well, it's near the end of the war, so that narrows it down, but I am not a history buff enough to really specify.
The Showa era was 1926 to 1989.
Sure. Isn't this being, like, presented as in, like, the 1980s, 1990s?
1980s.
1986.
Yeah, so...
Huh, that's weird.
My guess is that it's actually probably my guess is the 50s, because that's after the war.
Sure, we'll stick with that.
And I think that's to the extent of my history knowledge. That's why I majored in math.
Toward the end of the war, that gives us a pretty good timeline. The mid-40s to the mid-50s, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So 40, 50 years ago from when the story takes place. Sorry, 30, 40 years ago.
I'm wondering what the significance of this will is going to be in terms of the rest of the episode, because it's not something we find ever in episode 1.
Yeah, he was pretty against making a will in episode 1, it seemed.
When did the servants notice that Kinzo disappeared in chapter 1?
It was noted to be disappeared after they went to notify him that the bodies were discovered in the garden shed. So this was like pretty early in the morning.
So that it seems to be that something happens to him when he steps out to see if his ward protected him. So
maybe.
The fact that he's around now made a different choice, seemingly, and now that's why we're getting the will here instead of in the chapter 1.
I just think that the will is actually going to have an immense amount of backstory if we get to see it.
Yeah.
So, I'm hoping.
So it probably won't. It's too early for that many answers.
We're almost 1/4 of the way through this entire thing, Kyle. All right. Let's get to the best part of this reading.
Yes. Back in the chapel, Goda informs everyone that Kanon is taking care of Jessica in her room. Dr. Nanja and Rosa convince Battler and George to head back to the mansion and leave the crime scene for the police to investigate. Battler had tried to do some minor investigations himself, but was unable to find even a single clue. They give their farewells to their parents' corpses and head outside. There, George and Battler discover the magic circle for the first time. Marie informs them that it is the 7th magic circle of the sun, and how it can be used to free oneself of physical or mental bonds. Battler asks Rosa if the chapel has any special meaning, as it seems disadvantageous to the culprit to arrange the crime scene like this. Rosa says the chapel was a sacred and treasured place to Kinzo, but neither she nor Goda had ever seen him pray there or even enter it. George points out there's an inscription in English in rusted gold letters on the arch above the door. Battler is bad at reading English, but apparently it says something like, "This door is opened only at a probability of some big number." George suspects the chapel was built so that one day, if by some miracle Beatrice were to revive and return to him, Kinzo could finally properly marry his one true love. Then, suddenly, Rosa remembers that there was only one key to the chapel, and apparently it had been in Maria's handbag since yesterday afternoon. If so, how on earth did the culprit manage to unlock and lock the chapel door? It would seem that this crime scene is also a locked room murder. Time once again stops, and Meta Beatrice asks Meta Battler how a human could have possibly created this locked room. Battler deflects, saying that there isn't enough information, and thanks to the devil's proof, you can't even guarantee that this is a real locked room murder anyway. After all, despite how much he searched, there could still be some method X by which the locked room could be entered that he just couldn't find. With Beatrice claiming that she used magic, and Battler saying there must be some unknown method, the game has reached a position of endless repetition, a game state in chess that is automatically resulting in a draw. To prevent this, Beatrice proposes a new rule. She says that from now on, when she speaks the truth, she will use red. Anything she says in red text is simply true, and she bears no responsibility of proving it. After all, her proof would always result in a claim of magic. It is up to Battler to find a method by which humans could commit these crimes. Battler begins his attack by questioning if the 6 who were killed entered the chapel through some sort of hidden door. Beatrice replies in red. Regardless of whether they were alive or dead, the 6 definitely entered through the door. Battler then questions whether or not there might have been duplicate keys to the chapel. However, only one key to the chapel exists. Battler then tries for the angle that the door was opened using lockpicks or a wire, but Beatrice counters, "It is impossible to lock or unlock the chapel with anything but the chapel's key." Battler then scrambles, saying that there must be some other way of entering through the door, even when it is locked, or that the door referenced earlier that the 6 entered through was another door, not the chapel's front door. However, Beatrice responds with, "When the door to the chapel is locked, it prevents any and all methods of entry or exit," and the 6 definitely entered through this front door, shutting down both those options. Battler flounders, unsure of how else a human could have committed this crime. Beatrice gloats, asking if Battler resigns, and says, "There's no greater joy than forcing a man like you to lick my shoes." Battler then decides to flip over the chessboard, and instead of looking for a way to enter a locked room, he should be looking for how a locked room was faked in the first place. He starts with the idea that the key given to Maria was a fake, and Beatrice shoots back with, "This morning, Rosa definitely took an envelope out of Maria's handbag, and from that obtained the genuine key to the chapel." Unsurprised by the response, Battler continues, "It is possible that up until some point in the recent past, there was a different key in the envelope." This seems to trouble Beatrice a bit, and she tells Battler that he can call her Beato instead of Beatrice-sama. Beatrice eventually replies that the key to the chapel truly was the object inside the envelope I gave Maria. But Battler seems to have expected this line. He presses further, asking if the envelope was completely under Maria's supervision until Rosa opened it. Beatrice falters and says that she can't use the phrase "under her supervision" in red, as when the envelope was in Maria's handbag, she no longer had her eyes on it directly. However, Battler can smell blood in the water, and this time presses her to confirm that no one else besides Maria had touched her handbag until Rosa took out the envelope. Beatrice once again is forced to decline to repeat the statement in red. Battler theorizes that while originally the envelope contained the key to the chapel, at some point the key was taken out to be used before returning it in time for Rosa to find it inside the envelope in the morning. This time, Beatrice is on the back foot, and she struggles to put up a piece of red that refutes Battler's claim. She says that the envelope I handed over to Maria and the one Rosa opened are the same thing, trying desperately to muddy the issue. However, Battler sees right through this, and demands that she repeat that the key itself wasn't used even once between those 2 points in time. Beatrice resigns the point, but says that so long as Battler continues to deny the witch, he will at some point have to suspect one of the relatives that he loves so. Even if he takes this board, in the end, he can't win against the witch. And with that, we have reached the end of this week's reading.
Man, you left out that killer line from Battler at the end. Parting remarks are the loser's privilege. Enjoy them as much as you want. That's such a badass line. I love that.
It is.
It's gloating for sure and not becoming of anybody, but it is a badass line.
Battler deserves to gloat a little bit here, though.
Oh, yeah.
It's the first time that Vito has actually been on the back foot here.
Mm-hmm.
Because they finally gave a rule that he can understand, I think.
Yeah.
And us as the reader can understand. And I think that this whole thing completely goes against what we just saw in the weird magical fight scene, and yet the two of them together make me think there's some sort of science fiction element now to it. Because obviously they introduced a huge fantasy element and a huge mystery element at the same time, basically, within our same reading.
Yeah.
Obviously wanting us to be able to figure out if someone could have actually done this with these red texts, yet still showing us that, like, there are mystical swords at Goatbed, and, like, the stakes are actually waifus, and, like, what? Like, where are they taking this?
Like you said, it was very jarring to move from the mystery and the murder to Kanon summoning blades with a goat monster and fighting him, and then now here we are back to something very grounded, something that we can we have a frame base to start working from to build our theories and what we think is going on.
I like that I liked thinking about it as like she's establishing constants in a scientific problem that Batman then has to work to find a solution. Yeah. And I also liked what he said that he remembers from Kyrie about the closer you get to the end, the easier the moves are to anticipate, because you start really narrowing in on what the weak points are.
Right.
That's a very common thing in chess, like just playing chess too.
Yeah.
So, two thoughts. One is pedantic, which is, so from now on, when I speak the truth, I will use red. Does that mean that when she doesn't use red, we can assume that she is not speaking the truth? Like, that's technically, by the phrasing, what that means. However, I don't think that's what it's going for.
No, because then she says, I can't use that phrase in red, which was also a true statement.
I agree with that, but I'm just, like I said, it's pedantic, but like that first part implies that any times that she speaks the truth, it must be in red.
All right, Mr. Clock Tower player.
It's definitely not the case, yeah.
I get it, but that was my first thought when I read that.
That might just be a localization thing, too.
I agree, but that was the first thing I thought of.
I'm not going to harp on you, because like you said, it's just a pedantic thing, but yes, I see your point.
Secondly, and the thing that I've been wanting to bring up this entire episode, where the fuck is Kumasawa?
Yeah.
I did a Control F on this document, and Kumasawa was not mentioned once.
True.
Where is she, and could she have been the culprit to all this?
She's just going to be the fourth Twilight death. She's just going to be...
I believe you. I believe that could be, but I also believe that she could have been an accessory to the murders of the first 6.
But also, then already our suspects that she's going to try to push are Kumasawa, Goda, Rosa. So Rosa's the only person like that I would say Battler gives a shit about. You know, maybe Kumasawa, because she's been around when he's been here before.
He tends to like people that haven't done him dirty. Like,
sure, he might like them just fine, but I wouldn't say he loves them. Like, he loves his family.
No,
right?
But I think he'll still care enough if they die.
That's not my point. My point is that she is going to have to start framing people.
Yep.
And she's like, what happens if it's somebody that you care about? Of the ones that we are currently suspicious of, he only cares about one of them.
Yep. But it's the most suspicious one.
Yeah. That really limits her what she can do. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought of it a couple times, but I didn't really hone in on that. Where the hell is Kumasawa throughout all of this? No one cares. No one says anything.
No. I don't think anyone's noticing. Like, that's not the thing that you're thinking of. It's like, oh, where's that one servant? You're thinking, oh, there are 6...
we don't know enough about what are her roles, like what are her responsibilities. Right? If she was on night shift, is it expected that she's asleep right now? Like, I don't know.
It's just really interesting because there is a suspect for who could have gotten the key between when Maria got it and when Rosa got it the following morning. Is like, if it wasn't Rosa again, it could have been Kumasawa, who we have not seen in the middle of the night.
Right. For that matter, could even have been any of the 6 that were killed.
Yep. Very true. It could have been Maria. Weirdly, like, there's nothing saying that Maria, in some of her downtime, did something. She's not going to tell us.
I feel like that's going to be, like, that might get, like, mentioned and then dismissed as, like, she's been with us. We would have noticed if she got up, I don't know. Yeah. Another thing I want to mention is the music. The song here at the end, Dread of the Grave. Great. Sick track. Sick track.
The music in this game is so good.
Yeah. If you don't remember what Dread of the Grave sound like, I have a little clip for you.
Yeah, fucking awesome. It's good shit. I knew, like, when we would get to, like, the Solvey parts of the story, we would start seeing some more interesting songs. I can't remember if I'm thinking of this or another story entirely, another game, whatever. But I believe you said early on that we have some sick tracks that we're not even going to get to until way late.
Because they're spoilery, I think.
You also got the one that's my ringtone that I said, when it played. I was like, oh, that song actually doesn't appear until way later.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of when we were together last.
That's very funny.
A couple other things I wanted to touch on about these new rules that are introduced. So the thing about the rules is that I feel like there are a lot of rules that govern Beatrice's behavior that we just don't know about. And this is an introduction to one of them.
Things like, did she implement the rule because she had to?
I think, well, the thing it does is that it gives us a very clear game mechanic. Because one of my notes that I wrote down at first was, well, how many red statements is she allowed to say at any given situation? And then it becomes clear as you go down the line of reasoning that she can say as many red statements as she can definitively prove until Battler either gives up or can disprove her. And that's the game. That's the basis of the game.
Yep.
And I can't remember, I don't have this in quotes, so I don't know if this is actually something that's said, but a note that I wrote down is that the rules of the game are sacred, which means that theoretically she is bound to them too. And that's why she's been bound into whatever this thing is with Kinzo for 30 years.
Beatrice says that when Battler basically says, like, why should I trust this is actually the truth? It's because, like, if I'm lying about this, then what do you even have? We have to believe that we're playing in good faith, otherwise this is nothing.
Yep. And I think that's part of it as well, is that I think that a stalemate is actually more like death to her than winning or losing.
She wants to avoid a stalemate at all costs.
Yeah. She started this game, but maybe had to continue the game. The game had to continue for some reason from episodes 1 to 2. She could, like, technically, if she could just take the win, she may have. But there's some outside rule that's like, I'm trying to entertain myself with this time loop. I need to not allow a stalemate, and Battler had found a stalemateable, like, position that then she added that rule that makes it no longer a stalemate. I think that's why the red thing was introduced in the first place, or at least that's the plot reason for it. But the gamer reason, because we're all gamers here, is that we get to then feel much more a part of solving this than just watching Battler figure it out.
The other thing is that Battler doesn't want a stalemate either, because that means his family is dead.
Yes.
And he's trapped in a hell dimension with supposedly a witch.
He would rather stalemate than lose, I think, and Beatrice is the other way around. Beatrice would rather lose than stalemate.
Yeah. Which I feel like is another kind of a game, or not gamification. That's the author telling the reader, we've seen these tropes, I'm not doing it. There will be a winner or loser, one over the other. Like that's what we're doing here, right? We're not going to play in this boring middle ground, whatever. And I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I was very excited for us to get to the Red Truth part. This was the reason why I recommended that we play Umineko in the first place. Is because these rules are such an interesting way to look at mystery, right? We all come from a social deduction game kind of background where like the rules are critical for like being able to deduce things. And so it's really cool to see this toolkit introduced into what would normally just be reading, right?
Yeah.
This is something that we can actually use to build our logic on. And I thought about it especially when Capelli, and when we did that Jubinsha game, we played a Jubinsha murder mystery kind of experience at one point. And the entire time I was like, I just wish this was Umineko. I was like, I just want them to give me a red truth so that we could have like this. These are the facts that establish things, and that gives us the structure. And that's one of the things I think is so cool about this is that conceptually, this is a way to play a murder mystery. Conceptually, Battler puts forth these theories and says like, can you say this in red? And Beatrice is able to strike them down. And so you can functionally play a game like Umineko. And in fact, at some point in the future, I would like to do that with y'all. I have, in fact, written some Umineko fan fiction, you can call it, or a game board, if you would like to call it that. And I am going to try and have y'all play my scenario.
That sounds awesome.
That fucking rocks, man. That's awesome.
I love that.
That is exciting.
That could easily be a podcast episode just in itself, listening to that.
Yeah.
Or is this something where you feel like we should get together to do it?
Yeah, we'll have to see. It's also one of those things where we might have to. It might be better to do it individually with each of you, because it's one of those things where, obviously, I'm not a mystery writer by trade, nor am I able to cheat by being literally a book where Battler's like theories.
I thought you were
to
say cheat by being a literal witch. Is what I thought you were about
that
to say.
also.
Damn.
That you know of. So there's obviously going to be some limitations when it comes to playing it as an actual game versus making it a written story. Like, obviously, the writer here gets to decide exactly what theories Battler hits on, right? And what he misses, that kind of thing.
Right.
For the narrative purposes. Whereas if I present you a mystery and then y'all are like, oh, this person did it because of this, and if that's correct, then that's the end of the game, right? So we'll have to discuss in the future how we want to actually play it out to make it most enjoyable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to do that at some point in the future. Long after, I think it will be playable after we complete the story. I think we will finish off the visual novel, and then y'all will get a chance to play that. So
makes sense.
Gives me a chance to write it. I have the mysteries written for all the Twilights, but I have to kind of fill in some of the details still.
Interesting. I'm very excited. That sounds fun.
So a few things I wanted to kind of hit on our normal segments. We talked about mystery versus fantasy. Obviously, we were given some heavy fantasy elements in this one, some heavy mystery elements in this one, kind of in contrast. So just in terms of mystery, I want to ask, do you think Battler's right? Do you think that he's hit upon the correct answer for what happened in the chapel?
Yeah, because it's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah.
Well, then it must be true.
Well, that's just why I think it's right, because I can't think of anything else.
It is absolutely a valid answer given what we've been presented with. So,
yeah.
I will say that it is what I wrote down in my notes as what I assumed the answer to be, like, pretty early on in his reasoning. And I'm curious, because it looks like you want to read all of the things she says in red.
I'm not going to say them again, but I'm going to keep a log of them in the notes. That way, if we wish to go back and look at them, we will have them.
Oh.
Because these are objectively true statements, and that is a tool that we might be able to use in the future. So,
yeah, thank you for doing that. But then my question to posit to y'all is, at what line of those true statements in order did you deduce the answer? Or did you not know where he was going until he got there?
I didn't think about it too much. I was
Me
just
too.
along for the ride for this one, so I
Okay.
maybe
I think that's fair.
like I think it was pretty obvious where he was going with it, right? When he's like realizing when he had like the diagram on the screen, and he says like where was the key in between these moments. I was like, oh, okay, I see where he's going with this now.
I think for me it was right after Beto said the 6 definitely entered through this front door, because that takes a lot of possible speculation away.
There's no hidden room. It's not through a window. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'm like, well, then you would have just had to get the key. Like, there's no reason that the key couldn't be gotten twice. But like I just did that so quickly in my head that like I didn't clock it. Like I'm just right there. I'm more interested in seeing how Battler's gonna solve it more than I'm interested in my own theory.
Yeah, the flow of this segment is just it's really solid. It's hard not to just read through it and be like, yeah, the entire time.
Well, that's why I'm thinking about it, because I'm like, is my line of thinking matching up with his line of thinking? Is he thinking about it in a different way than I would? Because the point where my brain jumped to somebody probably took the key from Maria and replaced it is the possibility here was when she said only one key to the chapel exists. And then I also did consider lockpicking, but then her next statement was, it is impossible to unlock the lock to the chapel with anything but the chapel's key.
Take that, Hayley.
And that's where I kind of settled.
Yeah, lockpicking I think was my first thought as well.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I settled on like, okay, somebody took the key from Maria and replaced it. At least that's going to be the thing that she can't disprove. So, I was just curious.
I was also reading this at 4 a.m, so I was.
Well, that was a personal choice that you made.
I read these as soon as we're done recording because I'm just so interested in knowing what happens.
So suspects, if there is an accomplice, right? My top 3, I guess, at this point are Goda, Kumasawa, Rosa, and then Sleeper Cell Genji, I think, is still a strong possibility.
Sleeper Cell Genji is such a good title.
Not even a sleeper cell, but just like lying, like hiding in plain sight, right?
Yep.
He's furniture, but is it because Beatrice taught Kinzo how to create furniture with him? You know, I feel like there could definitely be something there. Or Nanjo. I guess we don't know what happens with Nanjo from when he leaves hanging out with the kids to going to his own room.
Can't be Nanjo. He's my good boy. I can't let him. I can't let you besmirch his name. His good doctor name. But I have the same suspects. Like Kumasawa has been in my mind since we started this recording, so I want to see what happens with her in the next reading, because I think she has to appear.
I really like your Kumasawa theory. I definitely want to know what's up with her and Rosa. What happened between Rosa being at the chapel and waking up in the morning are my 2 biggest anticipated question marks. Like, I want to know what the hell is going on there. To be honest, I've been really bad about kind of keeping in my head suspects, just because I love Beatrice. I'm just so biased.
Let's not beat around the bush. Number 1 suspect right now is Beatrice, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
so that's the thing. That is something I'll try and keep in mind going forward. But also, I do have one little thing where I like to write down fun little pithy one-liners to amuse myself as I'm taking my notes, and I didn't really find a good place to drop them in naturally in the discussion today. So if you'll allow me the floor, I have a couple of those to throw out.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, the first one was Beatrice and Hannibal would get along. We knew that. I got that one in there. Great. But Beatrice being best friends with Black Phillip was not on my bingo card. I loved that. This is the wrong crowd for these.
Not a reference I understand. Yeah, sorry.
You guys, you gotta see the witch. May thy locust chip and shatter into gold butterflies. Been thinking about Dune a lot recently. Just a lot of Dune floating around in my brain. And Beatrice really said R.I.P. to Agatha Christie, but I'm different. Okay, at least we got one.
I love that one. senior year of college, I was in an Agatha Christie play, Murder on the Nile. That was great. I really enjoyed that.
Well, I hope at least one of the listeners likes the Black Phillip one, because that was the first thing I thought when that guy showed up.
Well, next time we'll be reading about 3 hours of the VN, ending with the line, "Can you see it, Ushiromiya Battleeeeeeeeeeeer?" After which the clock advances from 1:35 to 6. And that is videos 28 through 30 of the YouTube playlist. And then I think we'll have one more episode after that to finish off episode 2 of Umineko. So we're getting there pretty quickly. So
I feel like episode 2 went by much faster than episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot less preface, even with that whole episode of just Shannon, Kanon, George, and Jessica.
So here we are, more than halfway through episode 2, and nary a mention of the epitaph.
True.
Yep. No mention of the epitaph. Barely any mention of Kumasawa. So.
How funny would it be if she just not mentioned for the rest of episode 2, and then she shows up in the Golden Land? I was hiding.
She chose a corner of Kinzo's study that he never even touches.
Didn't they search that study though in episode 1 when they were up
Found
there?
a really good hiding place.
Oh wow.
Well, hope y'all continue to join us, and don't forget to hop into the Off Meta Discord channel and find the Umineko podcast channels, and we have commentaries for all the episodes there if you want to leave your own theories that we can talk about in our message bottle segments that we'll be doing. We summarize each episode. Hope y'all have been enjoying listening along with us, and remember to think off meta.